Welcome back, everyone. Word Traction Network daily podcast, and this is North Korean BBQ. As has been well reported, Donald Trump, in a fit of petulance for which he has become famous, issued a recommendation to Pastor Pete Hegseth that we dial back our military exercises with our allies in South Korea. We have had a relationship for 75 years on the peninsula. I was just thinking today about my own dear father, dearly departed, how just by the luck of the draw, during the end of Korea, he was actually stationed at Fort Knox in he maybe he was looking for Mitch McConnell too. Uh, Fort Knox, where they up till very recently the U.S. kept our supply of gold and gold bullion, gold standard, the basis of our. It's fun because I think of Fort Knox and simpler times in the 50s, but that we may pull up there one day for a site inspection after Donald Trump leaves office and find out that somebody had already loaded all of the gold bullion onto a couple of private planes, and now it's all in the UAE being resold by our quote unquote allies in Dubai and throughout UAE, because they can't extract enough conflict gold out of the poor people in Sudan and DRC. That was an earlier podcast, late last week, talking about conflict gold again. But Korea is, well, it's a delightful country that is inhabited by wonderful people who are arguably the hardest working people. Japanese are right up there, but Korea have a well-earned reputation as being extremely hardworking folk. And I haven't seen the peninsula in decades. I don't even want to think about exactly how many decades because that just makes me feel old. But it was a much different country back then too, in the 80s or whatever the heck that was. And but delightful people and industrious and Samsung and they are doing the one in Dignity that we delivered to Korea earlier last year actually was when ICE apprehended a large number of Korean nationals who were authorized to work here, but they were picked up when in ICE's ongoing overzealous, we don't know what the fuck we're doing because we weren't trained program. And they insulted the shit out of our allies. And there was a charter plane arranged, and all of the affected were brought back home to Korea, and some of them returned to work here. Now, I don't know why after that sort of insulting treatment, but they have car plants and they have business to do, and people need their job, even in a country that is as antagonistic to any black or brown people or people of color that those people in Georgia that were scooped up. Thankfully, about 200 of them are still suing ICE for for pick a charge. I saw another unsettling picture today of a gentleman that was arrested in New York, and just the bruising about his face, just they beat the hell out of him. And we really have to figure out a way to get a hold of this. But as long as John Thune remains the most handsome coward in Washington, D.C., and they're all on holiday, then the solution to that problem is not coming soon. And I would argue that before the election, there may be some hand gestures at like they did after they killed Rene Good and Alex Preddy, that they changed their posture, their sort of outward activity level, but they raised the quotas, so they're behaving in the same way. But South Korea will remain, a lot of these things. Jesus Christ, Donald Trump's going to damage this beyond repair. It can be a list of 100 different things. And things like the DOJ are going to take a longer time to fix because Todd Blanche is destroying it every single day and will continue to do so until Trump is shipped far from DC. But, the relationships with our European allies and with our Asian allies like South Korea, they're going to take some knocks, and quite reasonably, these allies are going to say, oh, this candidate that just came in, the next American president is fantastic. At least they're sane and they're less than 90 years old. So this is going to be a good 4-year run. But how much are we going to invest in effort, treasure, bandwidth when we know that every 4 years that we could get another Trump-esque kind of idiot that doesn't understand the nature of international relationships, or one that is not as susceptible to graft and corruption as Donald Trump is. When we look up towards North Korea, we love you. Thank you for, South Korea. Thank you. Thank you for being a friend. And we'll see you at the next stop. North Korea, a little bit more challenging relationship. Of course, Trump loves an authoritarian because he's a wannabe authoritarian himself. He has those outward characteristics. He doesn't have the heart for it, I think, in the long term, and he ain't got much left overall. But when it's Kim Jong-un, Fat Boy Slim to his friends, this is a legitimate risk because he has nuclear weapons and now has the capacity to deliver a nuclear payload to just about any city in the United States, right? And there was a certain time in the not so distant past when their missile technology, the ICBM technology, was insufficient to the task of reliably delivering the warhead that distance. But they've got that, our ability to intercept. That's another issue since Pastor Pete can't seem to manage the inventory well at all. And well, that of course is part of the plan of the people in the cooperating powers in Asia, North Korea being one of them. Not the boss, not the leader, not the most powerful, but will work in conjunction with Xi Jinping and with Vladimir Putin, and to a lesser extent with Iran. So here's Kim. He's got nuclear technology he can sell. He's got ICBMs he can threaten us with and our neighbors and our other allies in the area. And he's an unstable character with maybe a high cholesterol count. I'm not a medical doctor, nor do I play one on TV, but he's a chunky motherfucker. So I would imagine he's at risk. And what his 13-year-old daughter is going to jump in, and she's going to turn out to be like a Marvel cartoon character, even more evil, if slimmer, than her father. We'll find out. The North Korean connection in this past week, though, was absolutely. It probably brought me some of the most joy that I felt in a very dark time is that we know that troops have been fighting on behalf of Russia in and around Ukraine and been killing a whole bunch of them. But also, they're getting some battlefield training that they wouldn't ordinarily get. So, the the soldiers that survive, and perhaps the commanders learning the lessons of the new world order battlefield, it's an advantage to them in a sort of regressive and grotesque way, but they're getting real battlefield chops. They're developing the experience. So that's one thing. But our dear friends in Ukraine did a little James Bond exercise where the the missiles that were about 150 of them were being rail brought across the rails in Siberia. And it seems that our dear friends and allies in Ukraine sabotaged the railway lines and blew up the missiles that were intended to go to Russia to be fired upon Ukrainian cities. And they blew them all up. And that supply is depending on whose maths you trust, was about a 3-month supply of a very important weapon for Putin. He is having trouble. Of course, his manufacturing capacity is under threat from drones from Ukraine. He's not out of fuel, but his fuel supply, his refined fuel supply that keeps his country running, is under constant attack. And also the Amazons, what are they called? They're uh, something berries. The Amazon equivalent in Russia is being, because they are a legitimate target, because they supply certain dual use technology items to the Russian military effort. UN's looking at it, but UN's in a weak position with Donald Trump slapping them around every way from Tuesday. But it's that one little operation. I the first time I saw it, I was like, "Oh wow, they got that was a good hit with a drone." But then when I looked, it was fully 4,000 kilometers, which is a little bit outside what the current drone technology that's available to Ukraine. Ukraine can do. I think they hit targets up to and including 2,500 K from Ukraine from their launch site. But 4,000, that's a big jump. But how wonderful that they can show. We talk about impunity. They can't operate with impunity behind Russian lines. But remember that they did certain other sabotage, some sanctioned assassinations of Russian leaders in Russia. And then also they smuggled drones into Russia to get them closer to key Russian targets earlier in the conflict. That was 6 months ago. So our allies in Ukraine are industrious and brilliant and are innovating minute to minute on the battlefield and making the adjustments as far as trying to. Obviously, there's been it was a sad week. I think last week was the deadliest week in Ukraine since 22, when the conflict really heated up, and the number of dead or wounded Ukrainians. It's sad because the numbers are just um, yeah, these are good people who love their country, and it's maddening that war criminal and bad actor like Putin is doing this to our allies. Our European allies are trying to help Ukraine to the extent that they can. But when we know in the background that US is doing less than anything it can possibly do because of the special relationship between Putin and Donald Trump, that Donald Trump is under some degree of influence from Russian state security and has been for more than a decade, that Ukraine as an ally is not getting our best. They're not getting the Patriot. Obviously, we've been using a lot of Patriots like drunk sailors, uh, or soldiers, Pastor Pete. We were using those at the beginning of the Iranian operation to shoot down $20,000 Shahed drones using $3 odd million exquisite uh, uh, Patriot technologies. And you can't make them like a sandwich in the afternoon. It takes the lead time is 1.5 to 2 years, as I understand it. The other, of course, head fake was when Trump suggested that we would provide the technology so the Ukrainians could build their own patriots. And then he kind of walked that back for two reasons. Well, first of all, the technology is not Trump's to provide. You could say that the Raytheons of the world will listen to anything Trump tells them, and that's good argument. But they're not going to give away the store. They're not going to give away the tech. Of course, any of that technology that we were thinking about providing to Ukraine so they could build patriots and countermand the Russian assault, we have to assume with a great deal of certainty that that same tech and that proprietary secret information is in the hands of the Russians too. So how quickly are they going to be able to build their equivalent of Patriot missiles? They have similar systems, but as we learned, they sold those systems to Iran and to Venezuela. And how's that working out for you? So they didn't get Russia's best either. Putin keeps the best for the home front, and then sells the duds or the ones that are 3 years past their manufacturer use by date, and that's nasty Nick Maduro might feel lucky to have gotten out alive. That's it's an embarrassment what's going on in Venezuela right now, where we're just taking the oil profits and giving them back a few cents on the dollar in order to do earthquake relief and reconstruction. But of course, there are corrupt enterprises all throughout the military there. So we're stealing with two hands up here, and then whatever amount of coins fall to the floor for the Venezuelans' own oil that we're selling and taking the proceeds of, whatever little amount is left over that is given back to the Venezuelans is not making it to the people that need it because the military has lost control of one part of their. It's corrupt throughout the economy, but the PDVSA, the former national oil company, was the domain of a few of the generals, and they were able to bleed it dry, even though they were, pumping at 10% of their capacity because of corruption and an unwillingness or inability to reinvest in the infrastructure. So it's just, it is two piranhas going at it in a fight to the death. And they thought they were corrupt down there. Wait until you saw Donald Trump and his kids, and they're going to gobble up some valuable pieces of real estate. I can imagine a few of them as I've spent some time down there. and they're going to do the same thing and try to chop up Cuba. And when the rich Cuban population in Miami that votes reliably MAGA in red say, well, we have clear title to that property, and Trump is going to say, "Fuck you," and but they'll still vote reliably for Trump because all of the violence against black and brown people, the Cuban immigrants that have been in Miami for generations, don't see themselves as brown people at all, or even broadly Hispanic or Latino. They're just Miami people, and their dedication to their brothers and sisters, specifically those of more limited means that are being killed or deported, their dedication to fight for their brothers and sisters is waning at the very best. It's a horrible embarrassment. But we didn't travel to Cuba today. We were hanging out at the Korean BBQ. Yeah. So the last item that I'll leave you with is just take a step back and think about the multipolar system that the autocrats think is in their best interest. Of course, China, Xi Jinping is at the top. He's the apex predator. He has the real million man. He has the troops, he has the tech, and he also has the will to use it, but also the humility to know when to sit on your hands. When the enemy, or we'll call the U.S. his competitor, when the U.S. is doing everything on their own to destroy themselves in many ways, in in tech, in AI, in in energy and green energy, that the U.S. is doing so much by themselves to make themselves less relevant in the world, then let them do it. Right? When your enemy is, there's 27 different versions of this, but when your enemy is drowning himself, then let him go. It's and Xi Jinping, like I said, has the discipline. The His philosophy, what he came up with, is a patience that is uncharacteristic of the American soul. The move fast, break things allows you to innovate in certain situations, but it also applying that like Doge, we saw the results. You know, it can also mean that you step on your dick, and if you're an idiot, and you do more damage by moving fast as opposed to being patient, planning, having a strategy before you go into battle. Novel idea, right? But excuse me, attacked by a bug. Excuse me. But let's go back to our three poles. Let's think about the U.S. in North America, South America, and out to our outpost. We haven't gifted Hawaii to Xi Jinping yet, so we'll still count that as part of the U.S. Just like Alaska is still an American state for now, but I think it'll be in Vladimir Putin's portfolio before too long. But broadly speaking, that three pole system was U.S. has the Americas, and Putin has Europe, and Xi Jinping has Asia. And I know that's a lot of whatabouts. And what about our good friends in Australia, whose prime minister not necessarily covering himself in glory, but they're still our allies, so we'll fight for them too. The North Korean issue, if you look at Kim, is he acting in all ways independently of Beijing? No, no, he is not. We know that they're cooperating with each other, but when it comes to if Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party didn't want North Korea to have nuclear weapons, that would be a solved problem. But let's assume that he just called up Kim, I can't say fat anymore. That's not nice. He calls the North Korean leader and says, "I got a deal for you. I'm going to give you X, Y, and Z. You're going to turn over your missile technology." And no, listen to me. Listen to me. I'm going to be there in 15 minutes. I'm going to pick up all the shit, or else he's out of business. But what does Xi wants above all? Control over his region. South Korea and Taiwan are the wild cards. Philippines, that's a different animal. It's a smaller fish to fry at a different time. That's we've already, in exchange for getting China out to a degree in South America, meaning Venezuela, because they had the contracts for all of the Venezuelan oil, etc. There is there are Chinese intelligence assets thick throughout South America, and that's not going to change. We're going to continue to spy on China and Russia, and vice versa. But it's a good deal for Xi to get us the F out of Taiwan, right? Allow us. It's it's a delicate dance. It's all of the chips, not all the chips, but for argument's sake, Taiwan, big problem. Taiwan Semiconductor, big problem, right? NVIDIA, it's yeah, we're building fabs and and one or two data centers, but we're not going to be there by next week. And what G would like second on his wish list, he already, Hong Kong's already done, getting the U.S. off of the Korean Peninsula. That would be a major thing. Right? Donald Trump's, if he looks at the long term arc of history, Donald Trump's his best chance. So is Trump's decision, just like he made that, I'm going to bring 5,000 troops home from Germany, right? Not for Putin, then this is the same sort of thing in Korea. Because if Xi, and this is part of that larger conspiracy that brings in the international automobile industry, which we're doing as a one-off at a later date because it needs to be closer to the election because it has a lot of moving parts and a lot that will be concerning. So, but what if Xi, with dialing up and down the antagonism level with North Korea, could convince Trump to withdraw some or all of our troops from Korea? And Trump does it like a face-saving exercise, and he says, "Oh, we're going to save, $27.5 billion a year by bringing home. We have 20, call it 30,000 military, not all troops, 30,000 personnel in South Korea. It's a major, we've been there for since the 50s. It's mattered, and that's we exert influence deterrence from that position, but we also support other operations in Asia. We have friends in Australia. That's a long way away. We have Diego Garcia. That's a long way away. It's we fucked up the relationship with India pretty well, which was another was that on the wish list of another was that on a Putin or Xi wish list? Don't know. We'll find out. Um, maybe when Mrs. Vance becomes the president of the United States, then that story will be investigated more deeply. But that's she's a young person and brilliant and has young kids at home, so let her enjoy her children because we know that she's not enjoying her husband, and then she can rise to the prominence that she deserves at a later date. I mean, of course, it's all about the girls, excuse me, women, the double X variety superior humans. Isn't Sarah uh, Abdul's Abdul's wife, Sarah, who is a medical doctor, a psychiatrist? Isn't she absolutely delightful? That that clip I posted a few days ago that you've probably seen is her talking about having a difficult pregnancy with her daughter, and just having it kind of laid her out after the pregnancy, and just talking about the importance of the union. She's a doctor. The importance of unions when she was being treated unfairly and not given the time she needed post op delivery. That is something that should be given to every American woman. But we have to start somewhere, and the importance of unions. They're at their, unions overall on total enrollment are at the low ebb of any time since 1930. So and obviously the Republican Party is aggressively antagonistic to organized labor. But that goes with the dipping to the left. You don't have to call it democratic socialism if you don't want to, as Abdul al Sayed himself does not identify as DSA. But many of the programs, Medicare for All, etc., are ones that can be viewed as of the of the socialism general flavor. Um, call it whatever. Call it being a human. We have to get back to being human, and anything else. Every time one of the Jethro and Huckleberry Hound crew stands up and screams communism, it's like socialists, Medicare for all, right? Money out of politics, money in your pocket. And we don't support pedophiles and rapists. And we certainly don't elect them to run the executive branch of the US government. We're That's in our charter. So we can give you that. Why don't you guys work that out yourselves and get back to us and find out where you can you know. So I just any the so of course they're going to scream. It's better to scream communism because if you want to talk about two things that maggot doesn't understand, it's communism and socialism. But communism is a little bit has darker implications, perhaps. Cold War, Soviet Union, China, but also it's harder to define socialism, we look around the globe and we know that the social safety net in many of at the heart of many of our European allies' government, you know, to a greater degree in Scandinavia, a little bit less in other parts, but it matters a lot. It matters in Germany. It matters in France. It matters in UK, and that would be JD Vance or Marco Rubio, if he's allowed to, will try to stigmatize those sorts of governmental systems, those sorts of social safety nets, as destroying free enterprise, because that's one of the great Republican blather points. When it's nothing at all, and it's there are things that are shut down lines. Of course, uh, Dario Amodei, the head of Anthropic. It turns out that his wife, at some point earlier in her life, was again. This is not. I have not investigated this because I first heard about this. I think last night or early this morning. But maybe she was making some adult movies legally. I mean, we don't call it porn. We call it adult movies because it's only for adults. Um, but did she or didn't she, at some point, look to Jeffrey Epstein for funding for one of these creative endeavors? There's going to be a lot more because it's going to delight the Republican Party because you can yabut that and say, yeah, well, Trump, sure, Trump knew Jeffrey Epstein 40 years ago, but here's Dario's wife, and 15 years ago, whatever, she was looking for funding from a Epstein affiliated company for her creative films. Okay. Um, it doesn't stack up, but it muddies the water. And at a time when we need more clarity, not more obfuscation. So we'll find out. That'll be the Republicans will ride that horse as hard as they can. I would say where we are now in August, we're still in the sleepy end of summer. I would, if I were on the DNC part of this program, I would get that out. There was the one thing that I'm sure he said one other smart thing in his young life, JD Vance. But one thing that he did say that I agreed with is as far as the Epstein files go, and I'm not talking about the insensitivity to victims in that sense, right? Survivors. I'm framing this in a different way. But from a purely political point of view, would Donald Trump and the Republican Party have been better served to get everything out a year ago? Because there are some horrible things still to come. But if you learn nothing else on a day-to-day basis, is that our ridiculously short attention span is shrinking all the time. Would he have been better served, again, from a Republican strategist point of view, like Republicans like the Bulwark, would they have advised to get that out there and laundered, washed, blow dried, spun, Febreze, Downy, whatever. And by the time midterm elections came and it had been out there for 2 years, will all of the starch been blown out of the shirt, right? Yeah, that's my position, but they didn't. Todd Blanche is aggressively attacking it. 27 ways from next Tuesday, and will continue to lie when he's not prevaricating about everything related to the Epstein file transparency act and all that. Um, Now that we have the vote, now that he's in position, are you going to impeach Todd Blanche? Good luck. I would say that the energy that would be required, again, energy meaning not just and not money, because they get free legal, we don't, and bandwidth to do something like that. RFK Jr. should be impeached. Pastor Pete Hegseth also, 24 hours in a day. Right? Is it, well, it's a it is a gray day, a gray Monday in northern Massachusetts. But there's only so much time in a day, and we've got other shit going on. I heard my little four-legged assassin barking from somewhere. So that means that maybe his mommy is not giving him enough enough treats, love, and attention. But it's getting close to his dinner time, so I will leave you. Just remember, because there's all of the other moving parts distracting us all the time, that tripolar framing is a thing. To what degree? What will we know in 10 years that we don't know? A bunch. But think it corrupt in the middle, Donald Trump, right? And then to his east, he has to Trump's east, he has Vladimir Putin, Europe, and parts of Asia, and then Xi with the rest. And if Donald Trump is, I was going to say, if he is under the control of Russian state security, but we know that's true. It's all degrees. Nothing is, it's not 1 or 100. It's with him, it's 87 or whatever it is. And then Xi influences Putin. And when he needs help, Xi calls Fat Boy Slim in North Korea. Trump's pulling out 5,000 of the 25,000 personnel. What I want you to do is when the first 5,000 goes, I want you to do some of those rocket tests that you do so well, Fat Boy Slim, towards Japan, right? Because Takaichi San, Sanae Takaichi, the prime minister of Japan, is kind of bugging me too. So when you're doing your tests, Fat Boy, just lob them towards Japan, right? And that'll distract them a little bit. Might get a little bit of blowback, but Donald told me, but it's a secret, that by the end of next year, there's not even going to be a McDonald's left in South Korea. So then I can focus all of my attention north on Taiwan. And then I'll say, sotto voce, I can come back and take care of you, Fat Boy, or your diet may be taking care of you. You might be taking care of it yourself. So, yeah, that's so that is a setup that will allow Putin and Xi to enable Trump to weaken the U.S. to such a degree that by the time the Trump administration is gone, so much of the work that Putin and Xi wanted to be done will have been completed. So, all that on a Monday? Yes, indeed. It's a pleasure visiting with you. I will wish you a beautiful afternoon. Be kind enough, be good enough to share and restack and subscribe. And we will be back with you sometime tomorrow. Great. Thank you very much.